might say, well, what about the laws of nature? And what we argue here, law of gravity, strictly enforced. Why have I got that there? Well, I suppose because some things happen, car crashes, and we think, well, wouldn't it be nice if the laws of physics were suspended there? But of course, that doesn't quite work, does it? I was having some fun earlier thinking of the World Cup and what it would be like having a football match without gravity. And I suppose it would be a wee bit like Quidditch in Harry Potter, where they're all kind of playing a game, flying around and stuff like that. But it wouldn't really work. If the law of gravity was just kind of randomly suspended, then people would get hurt then. So the laws of physics are there. And it isn't possible, it's not the thing that they would just be suspended, just to stop, I don't know, a train crash or something. Next thing would be a question of human freedom. Humans like freedom. Humans do not like to be constrained. And the sad fact is that most human suffering, not all, but the great majority of human suffering is the result of human sin, human folly, and rebellion. I mentioned Syria and Iraq. There's countless places like that around the world at the moment. Many of my Nigerian students that come on a Sunday morning are very concerned about the breakdown of the state's power in the north of Nigeria. And you can go into church and you have a good chance of being machine gunned just for going to Sunday service. That's the weekly reality in Nigeria today. But that, if you like, is the flip side of human freedom. If God stepped in and stopped people doing things, well, we could say, well, okay, God, could you not just stop the kind of the violent stuff or the rapes or something? And then, but why stop there? Eventually, it would be stopping people doing what they want to do, and God allows us our freedom to see what we do with it. There was a poet with a very strange name, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, an atheist poet called Algernon Charles Swinburne, and he wrote a poem called Glory to Man in the Highest. And that doesn't really work terribly well if you think about the 20th century, just Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, Mao, Pol Pot, the inventors of nuclear weapons. It's not so great, glory to man in the highest. Human freedom is something we're given, but sadly some humans abuse that freedom, and we must just pray for good to prevail. The next one, put the wise owl here just to remind ourselves that we don't know everything. Well, maybe that's a very obvious point, but we don't know everything. If you go to the National Gallery, which I imagine some or many of you have been to, and you see these huge great canvases with all the kind of Dutch masters or whoever it is. If you're right up close like this, you can see some dark and some squiggles and some stuff, but you can't see the whole thing because you're too close to it. And in a way, when we're close to suffering, we're a bit like that. We're very close to it and we can see the dark shades, but we don't see the whole picture because we don't have complete knowledge. We don't have all the knowledge that God has. We're right in close, like a short-sighted person, if you like. But Christians believe that one day we'll know the whole picture. One day we will know the whole picture, but meanwhile we've just got limited knowledge. If you can imagine, if you've never heard of surgery, you've had a sheltered life, you've never seen it referred to, discussed or anything, and then you're put into a room where a doctor is sawing off someone's leg. And you think, that's outrageous, that's terrible, goodness me, and you're kind of having to be restrained because you're trying to stop him doing what you think is evil. And then someone explains to you, well, actually it's got gangrene, and we're saving his life through this. We don't know everything, we don't know the whole picture, but we do believe that sometime we will know the answer. And the next slide, of course, this is where we get to the specifically Christian answer. It's not just a kind of God and stuff happening here. The Christian faith is not like other faiths. It has resources and answers that, I have to say, other religious traditions don't have. Similarly, it is simply because Jesus himself was God and entered into the suffering. He entered into that. He wasn't remote from it. He wasn't someone that was just totally remote. Tim Keller, the great minister in New York, who's written some helpful books, said that if people criticise the view that, stuff I've said up so far gets God off the hook, he says, remember that God put himself on the hook. He entered into the suffering of the world, and so he knows from first hand what it's like to suffer. We think of the cruel death that Jesus experienced, and beyond the torture, all the things, the whipping, the nailing, the dying of thirst. Beyond all that, the weight of human guilt and sin of everyone, just about beyond belief. And so at least we do know that God is not some kind of remote, far-off person who doesn't really understand how we feel. He absolutely does. And the cross teaches us that. Then, next one would be just Christian experience. Read biographies of people who've managed to get through and keep their faith intact. When I was a lot younger, I read some of the works of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was put up in prison camps in Russia, after the Second World War, and he wrote this book, The Gulag Archipelago, about all the prison camps. And at the end of that, he wrote something which seems very surprising. He said, "Bless you, prison, for having been in my life." And you think, what? Bless you, prison, for having been in my life. Because he said, it was when I was in prison, when everything was stripped away, family, job, everyday concerns, it was then I got thinking. And it was then he was able to think that maybe he hadn't given God the place in his life that was deserved, and his whole life was turned round, so that by the end of it he could actually say, "Bless you, prison, for having been in my life." Another case would be a professor I know called Charles Thaxton, who has got diabetes, and for some years he's had his legs amputated at the knee, and he was doing a conference in the Czech Republic, a nice city, Prague, and it was full of atheist students, and he was defending the Christian faith. And one of the Czech Republic, incidentally, is the most atheist country in Europe. Very sad that the years of communism have done that. It didn't happen in Slovakia, strangely. It's much more Christian. As Czech Republic, big challenge for the gospel, the atheists. So this guy says to him, quite scornfully, "Professor, how can you sit in a chair when you've got only one leg was sawn off? How can you sit there in your chair with one leg and be thankful to God?" And he had a bit of an edge in his voice, and Charlie Thaxton just smiled at him and said, "Well, you've got two legs. Do you thank God?" And that was it, because he had learned to cope with that, and it was a witness. The trial that he'd undergone was indeed a witness to others. Next one, and then I guess this very important thing, that eternity is the scale that we need to think on, an eternal perspective. This is sometimes criticised by saying, "Oh, it's just pie in the sky when you die. You're just dreaming of some place far away to make life palatable now." But that's a perversion of real Christianity. Real Christianity knows that there's an eternity to come, and wants to get there, looks forward to it, a place where there's no suffering and no sadness. But it's been most sure that there is a good world to come, have been those very people who've been energized to make this world a better place. So Christian experience and eternity in our hearts. Maybe you know the hymn that used to be sung at funerals in Emmanuel's land. I'll bless the hand that guided, I'll bless the heart that planned, when throned where glory dwelleth in Emmanuel's land. Well, just to sum up a couple of things then, and we come to, yes, the last slide. We Christians don't claim to have all the answers. That's very important. We need to approach these things with humility. We need to approach these things with practical love and concern to demonstrate that we care. But I hope that these pointers may help us to demonstrate the credibility of Christianity, even in a suffering world. We need to take account of the reliability of the laws of nature, the reality and consequences of human freedom, the limitations of our knowledge, the sufferings of Jesus on the cross, the testimony of many who have found a stronger faith through suffering, and the eternal perspective within which our trials are to be seen. And whatever the limitations of these answers may be, the atheist answer is not even, well, they don't even get to the question, because the question doesn't make sense, and the only answer is despair. But with Christian faith, we do have a God who does care, caring so much that he sent his one and only Son to enter into the very suffering of this world, a suffering which is part and parcel